Health Canada is still searching for the origin of 200 kilograms of cannabis in Manitoba. In December, the batch of unlicensed crop found its way into the inventory of Winnipeg-based cannabis producer Bonify. Almost 200 grams of the product were sold before the company issued a full recall and halted sales. And while the investigation is ongoing, a BC-based company says DNA tracking could have prevented the situation in the first place. Robert Galarza is the CEO and director of BLOCKStrain Technology Corporation. He wants to change the relationship between cannabis retailers and their customers. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Doing all right. Really happy to have you here on the show. So can you explain for us exactly what cannabis DNA tracking is?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, really what it boils down to is, cannabis is a very unique plant and a very unique medicine in terms of what's been put out in the marketplace. And for kind of the history of the industry, products have always gone by strain names. That's been the nomenclature that's been used. But in reality, every one of these particular strains has its own various genetic sequence that associates itself to the patients and consumers that are using it. And we, through both a combination of science and technology, we can now genetically identify those products with a kind of active master registry off the mother inventory that's created, and then we actually have a solution that allows us to rapidly do quality assurance and verification to show that the products being grown down the line match up to the mother source materials that were registered from day one.
Now, BLOCKStrain, as I understand, uses similar technology as cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. I mean, hence the play on words, right? Blockchain, BLOCKStrain. Can you explain in layperson's terms just how that factors into this?
Yeah, absolutely. So the blockchain side of this thing really has to do with immutability of the record, right? So when we built the solution, we built it from the framework of understanding that the blockchain side of it is just being able to show that on this particular date, at this particular time, a particular strain was registered with a particular genetic profile, and that can never be changed in the future. And then when a product is validated against that, whether it be for genetic verification or whether it be through any sort of mandatory testing or pesticide or mold testing, when those tests occur, those all connect back to an immutable record that can be supported by basically we run on what's called Hyperledger, which is kind of an IBM platform from a blockchain perspective. But really, that boils down to just having a consistent record across the board. It's funny, like when the blockchain stuff came about, like everyone kind of talks about the cryptocurrency stuff, really has nothing to do with our business. Our business just looks at the actual record-keeping purposes and how that technology can function and be very efficient and transparent.
What's the problem with the current system of naming strains?
Well, I tell you, the real problem is there's two sides of it, right? One of the bigger problems that's occurred since the dawn of time in the industry has been that popularity of a strain name ends up becoming what everyone creates as their strain, right? Because you can't look at the product and be able to tell the difference really, right, unless you're, being very nuanced in terms of like that's the difference between the Maui Wowie or a Girl Scout cookie or Blue Dream or et cetera. And the problem is that in the early days of the industry, in California and areas that we actually started in, myself, my partner, you would have a popular strain that would come about, be like, oh, this is the won the award, and then you would see 500 of those pop up in the stores left, right, and center, right? Mm-hmm. And so that was the first part of it. That was one of the bigger issues. The second part of it is we're still holding on to kind of this old rhetoric that's created by the producers. And when these track and trace platforms are put into place, and the partners that we work with on the technology side, we love the fact that systems are doing great indexing and tracking, but that information shouldn't be provided by the producers themselves. That information should be provided by the third-party validation system, right? And then we see that in other industries. You see that in, let's say pharmacies, right? You have patents, number one, and then you have third-party validation companies that come in and validate that the product is what it says it is, and then we track it through the system, right? So we want to serve as that source material validator, or be a part of an ecosystem that can validate the products at the very front end, and then we can track it, through our system and through partner systems and other technologies as well, give better visibility across the board.
Why is tracking cannabis so important?
Well, really what it boils down to is, when we looked at the mandate coming down from the regulatory bodies, right, and obviously here it's Health Canada and the federal government, and in the states it's usually the state governments, they're usually wanting to tackle two big issues, right? And the number one issue is keeping it out of the hands of kids, right, which is a huge one. And then the second one, part of that is restricting and limiting black market supply. And one of the challenges in in Canada, there's also been this very significant gray market, right? Which is, product that's grown legally, but then somehow makes it into kind of a pseudo illegal market through the dispensaries that aren't really legal. We see that a lot here in BC. The real problem is you can't tell the difference between legal and illegal product if everything's just registered by name, right? So how do you start to restrict the product that's on shelves? How do you know what's illegal or not illegal product, right? Which is legal, which is illegal? So that's where registration becomes so important and a realistic registration, right? How do we create a registry that can be actionable? Like, how can we create something that Health Canada or the suppliers or the retailers or even consumers can go back and double check, say, hey, is this what it's supposed to be? And this kind of came from a twofold approach. One, we really love, we really support consumers getting what they pay for, but on the medical side, it's actually even more paramount, right? It's dangerous to potentially be getting the wrong medicine, and it's really, and part of this just as an industry, we're young, we're learning, we're growing, and this is kind of one of the things we say. Let's not look back and see the mistakes we made because it's been such a short period of time, but what can we do moving forward to really kind of raise the bar?
Well, speaking of it being such a short period of time, I wonder how much you think people really care about getting the exact pot that they're looking for, given that we are still so close to people completely purchasing cannabis on the black market.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the interesting part about this is that almost every single person you talk to, both the very novice consumers and the people that have been consuming for a very long time, almost every single one of them has that horror story, right? Mm-hmm. Oh man, that time that I tried that product, right? Yeah. A bad experience, right? And it's not unlike any other industry where if we just considered it just pure vice and non-medicine, and a lot of what we look at is from a medical perspective, we have to give patients exact information. You can't make little errors and mistakes when it comes down to people's health, right? But if you're talking about even the recreational side, you may not. If you walked into a liquor store and you wanted to buy vodka and you picked up the bottle and it was clear and ended up being gin, it's not like you would be like, it'd be disappointing, right? It wouldn't end your, be a health issue, but it would be hey man, this isn't what I thought I was buying. Right. And I think that's just, we can't just lean upon the fact that people have bad habits. Whenever you have a kind of a black market, of course people are going to get whatever they can get because it's difficult to get, right? But like in an industry where we have the ability to really identify, and even for us, we want to see the industry grow. Like quality products should be higher priced. Like I don't want to buy $2 gram myself. Like I want to buy something that's $15, $20. It's really good, but I just want to know that it's really good.
Would this technology have prevented what happened with Bonafide?
It would have, and there's two sides to it, right? It's part of it is if you've got a system where right now the testing regimes that are out there in under the auspice of Health Canada is every batch of product has to be tested for microbial chemistry pesticide testing, right? So we should have seen the molds immediately when the batch had molds, right? The problem is right now a lot of the systems are being done through manual paperwork. And this is no fault to the labs because we partner with labs. Like that's what our system is to help the labs with efficiencies, and no fault to the producers because, again, they're doing the best they can with a lot of supply and a lot of demand trying to move a lot of product through. What we're trying to do is say, look, this isn't there's an easier way to automate this process. So when a mold test or a pesticide test says positive, an alarm can go out immediately, right? So there's an immediate notification across the board to all parties, both the labs and the producers and potentially the regulatory bodies to say, hey, this batch is bad. Let's go back. Let's not have to recall this once it's on the shelves. We can get it at the source. So that's one part of it. Now, on the genetic side of this, if we look at was this product illegal or illegal? And again, I don't know the situation with Bonafide, so I do not want to make any sort of claims. But in terms of like being able to limit any of what we call diversion, right, when any of that black market product can make its way into legal supply chain, you have to be able to do genetic-based validation as well, right? So that every batch, when it's being tested for the base level microbials and pesticides, we're also doing another simple test that says, hey, look, yeah, this matches up to what it was supposed to be. These are the 10, 20, 50 strains that were registered by the producer, and this is actually from that inventory that they say that it is. And really, that's the other side too. We want consumers to be able to look and trust the products. And we think for producers that are doing everything right, that they deserve to be able to stand behind, be able to say, look, I stand behind my product.
Is DNA sequencing technology fast and cheap enough to be useful in a retail environment, or could it lead to products stuck in limbo while we wait for expensive results to come back?
Yeah, the beautiful part about it is twofold. The registration process, which is the whole genome sequencing that we do, that's a little longer, but that can be done at the very, very early stage of a growth cycle. So by the time the plant is grown and matured into the point where it's actually flowering, we've already done the base level registry, and then any of the secondary genetic tests are very rapid, just very similar to your base level testing. So it's not going to take any longer, and the costs are, if this would have been 5, 6, 7 years ago, then yeah, we would have been challenging. But the great part is, as we marry technology, both in enterprise technology and the blockchain stuff from record keeping purposes, as we marry that to genomic science and genomic technology, which has really advanced aggressively the past 10 years, it makes it to where it's fully cost effective. We think a few cents per gram at most is definitely worth its weight in terms of trusting medicine, trusting product.
How do you see this being used in the future?
There's two sides of it, right? One is on the medical side, we believe that every single product should be identified and validated. The other side of it too is I believe, and we really have a philosophy of supporting growers. So if we can create, because here's the other side of it too, is right now there's no patents on these strains, right? So if you're a grower or a microprocessor or you're growing forward-grown plants and you've created this incredibly unique medicine, right, and you want to do a licensing agreement or a supply agreement with a licensed producer, you can validate the genetics and have a record that they're yours, and before you put them in the supply. So now you can trust that the product you're going out there isn't getting stolen, and if you think it is, then you have a way to cross-check against it. And what the best part with that is then you lead to really cool innovations, right? Then we get to better understand the genetics of different types of medicine, and where it gets really cool, and this is where our evolutionary geneticists are always talking to us and nerding us out a little bit. Once we really understand the genetics on this side and start to index those genetics and understand them, now we can start linking those genetics to patients or customers. So now all of a sudden, if you're a 35-year-old woman who has this particular type of ailment, and you happen to have this is your genetic makeup, we can now track that to the genetic profile of strains with which support that particular ailment. And then, and we can find like types of strains in the same genetic hierarchy, right, in the same family, right?
That is very neat stuff.
That's where it gets cool. Of hey, man, not only am I getting what I pay for, but I can get what's going to work for me. And that as somebody who's really sensitive to THC, I'm one of those get paranoia people, right? I'm always but I'm 40 years old, and I was an athlete. I got back issues. I certainly got got all kinds of injuries. I'd love to be able to feel better, but I'm also fully functioning CEO of a public company. I gotta make sure I got my druthers with me too, right?
Yes, sir. Robert, thanks so much for joining today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it as well.
You take care. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
Robert Galarza is the CEO and Director of BLOCKStrain Technology Corporation.